All right, let's turn to more breaking news, this time out of the Supreme Court. The justices are handing down a total of 6 decisions today, and one siding with a woman out of Ohio in a reverse discrimination case. Let's start there with team coverage to break down all of these cases. And joining us right now is CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson and CBS News chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford. Thank you both for being here with us today. So much going on. Jan, I want to start with you. Can you walk us through what happened in this reverse discrimination case?
Sure, Margaret. I mean, it is a big day at the Supreme Court. We're in June now, so we're going to start getting a lot of these really significant rulings. And this is one. Marlene Ames was an Ohio woman, had a long career with the State Department of Youth Services. She put in for promotion, and she was passed over for that. Then she got demoted. Well, the people that got those jobs were both gay and she's straight. She said, that's discrimination. So she sued, and the courts threw out her claim because they said she had to jump through an extra hoop. As a straight woman, a member of a majority group, she had to prove something more than a non-minority group would be able to do. So that was the issue in this case. She appealed it up to the Supreme Court, and today, in a unanimous ruling by Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, the justices said that extra hoop, that additional burden, is not required under federal law. And so Marlene Ames now can try to prove her case in court that she was discriminated against as a straight woman. Discrimination, the court said, is discrimination, and those same standards and rules should apply. This brings Ohio and 20 other states and the District of Columbia in line with the majority of states that didn't require this extra hoop. And so Marlene Ames and other employees in those states now won't have to show that additional evidence. A very important case, and like I said, unanimous.
Yeah, and that makes it a big deal here as well. Jessica, I want to bring you in here. What are your thoughts about the case? Any surprises?
No, and Jan has covered this case and interviewed the parties, and I just want to echo what she said. A unanimous Supreme Court said when you're a plaintiff and you walk into federal court and you're alleging employment discrimination, you're not going to have a different standard based on either the color of your skin or whether or not you are part of the LGBTQ community, that under the statute, Title VII, that governs employment discrimination cases, that you're not going to have to prove more in order to try and continue with your case. You don't have to show the so-called background circumstances test. You don't have to prove that your employer is, I believe the language is, the special type of employer that discriminates against members of the majority. You walk in there and you're on the same footing as anybody else. And I think this was expected after the oral arguments.
Yeah. Okay, so for the next case here that the justices also talked about, this is another decision from the Supreme Court. They blocked Mexico's $10 billion lawsuit alleging that U.S. gun makers have fueled cartel violence. Jan, what stood out to you in this case?
Well, also another unanimous ruling from the Supreme Court, this one by Justice Kagan, a liberal on the court. And here the justices said that Mexico could not recover against Smith & Wesson and another distributor under this old law that Congress passed back in 2005 that generally shields firearms manufacturers from liability if their products are used in crimes. Mexico said there was an exception because the gun makers knew that these guns were going into the country and causing all this violence, and so they aided and abetted those crimes, and that was the cause of all this gun violence. A federal appeals court in Boston actually bought that argument, saying that it fell within this exception to that law. And the Supreme Court today said, oh, no, it doesn't. Mexico, you cannot recover from this. And the law says what it says. This is protecting gun manufacturers, as Congress intended, from that liability when guns are used in crimes.
And so, Jessica, were you surprised about this? Because clearly the Supreme Court disagreed with the lower court on this one.
No, because of the claim here. I think it was an uphill battle. As Jan laid out very clearly, we're talking about a statute. This isn't a Second Amendment case. We're talking about a statute that generally shields gun manufacturers. And Mexico was making, I think, legally a difficult argument, even though it was successful in one court of appeals decision, that you could tie the behavior of U.S. gun manufacturers strongly enough to the violence that happens in Mexico to impose liability, to find that there is an exception under that statute such that they should be liable. I think given the difficulty of making that claim under this particular statute, and given, again, what happened in oral arguments, although I want to be careful, of course, we can't say, well, it sounded like they were going this way.
Right.
It doesn't always happen. No, not a surprise here. And of course, we should remind everybody that a decision based on statutory interpretation means that Congress can go back if they want to. There's nothing that the Supreme Court said, well, under the Constitution, you can never impose liability. This is about interpreting a statute.
Okay, got that. And so many decisions today, but talk to us about the religious rights case with Catholic Charities. Jan, we'll start with you.
Well, again, another unanimous case. Why do I keep highlighting that? Because we think, and the narrative is that this court is so bitterly divided. They're at each other's throats. It's, one side against the other. And again, on these major cases today, they are unanimous. They're often unanimous. In fact, almost half of the time. So I think that's an important reminder that, they're more often or they're frequently together. And this was the one, an important religion case. The Wisconsin Supreme Court refused to give Catholic Charities an exception and said that they had to pay unemployment taxes because they were not primarily basically religious in nature. State government, federal governments, they generally give religious institutions exceptions under that kind of law. And so the Wisconsin Supreme Court said, no, Catholic Charities, you don't qualify. They argued that that violated the First Amendment and their right to religious freedom, and the justice today unanimously agreed. That's a big religion case. There are others this term. They probably won't be unanimous, but on this one, Catholic Charities will be able to get that exemption.
Yeah, and Jessica, your take?
Oh, exactly as Jan said. So we're talking about a state law, and we're talking about the criteria that you need as a religious organization to be exempt from having to pay into the state unemployment tax. And in this case, what the Catholic Charities said is they were being discriminated against because they didn't actively proselytize. And so while their aim was service, and it wasn't fair to discriminate against religions where maybe you are not, again, as actively proselytizing. Maybe it doesn't look under the criteria like your primary objective is to promote religion, but that in promoting according to this Catholic Charities, in promoting their mission, that was more about serving at food banks and soup kitchens. And they're saying the eligibility harms us, and it harms us in a way that violates the First Amendment, the free exercise clause. This is a clause where the court has been very generous, I think, to religious objectors who walk in and say we're being discriminated against. And here again, we have the court saying we agree with you. And again, not a surprise after the oral arguments here. As Jan said, I don't think we will be talking for the rest of the term about here's another unanimous decision, but really important to note that when it comes to important cases that we do talk about, that sometimes you do get every justice across the ideological spectrum saying, I agree.
And this was one of those moments. Wow, a busy, busy day today. Jessica Levinson, Jan Crawford, thank you both for your insights. We appreciate your time today.